horror games. Definitely one of the genres I've dabbled in less than others. I mean, I've played a bit of it, but I wouldn't call myself super experienced either. But, like all genres, you gotta start somewhere, right? A lot of people start with iconic games like Resident Evil or Silent Hill. Me though, I started with Five Nights at Freddy's. Now, I got into FNAF 2 years after it came out, cause when it hit the scene, I was still a bit young, and as such, the mere sight of a YouTube thumbnail of the game was enough to make me shit bricks. I did eventually cave though, and ended up basically binging the entire franchise. To put that into perspective for you, that meant I had FNAF 1 through 4 to get through, and FNAF World, which I didn't find out about till a bit later, and on top of that, Sister Location was on the horizon, so my plate was pretty full. Today though, I want to keep things focused on the original trilogy for a retrospective of sorts, as well as to see how these games stack up from a more critical lens. People seem pretty split on the franchise as a whole. Some say it's a good entry-level horror franchise with an interesting story to decode, others argue it's a shallow jump-scare simulator with overly simplistic gameplay and a story that was getting needlessly convoluted by Game 2. There's a lot to go through here, and even more games to get through whenever I feel like coming back to this franchise, so I just want to give my take on things. Let's start with the original Five Nights at Freddy's. FNAF was made by one guy, Scott Cawthon. He mainly worked on, random projects rooted in Christianity, okay then. But he also made some games on the side as well. The important one of these was Chipper & Sons Lumber Company. It was some game where you make trees or something, I'm not sure. I only played it briefly for this footage, but most people's focus was the characters. A lot of people found them creepy, resembling weird-ass Chuck E. Cheese animatronics. After seeing this, Scott Cawthon, in one of the best instances of turning lemons into lemonade, made this weakness into a strength by making a game where you defend yourself from child-friendly murder bots, taking criticism from one of his previous games and using it to inadvertently create an indie horror phenomenon, which is either one of the greatest displays of improvement or spite, depends on how you look at it. Going back to the first game after all this time really puts into perspective just how far this series has come. It went from a random game thrown on Steam made by one guy, to a series spanning over 10 games with media littering your local Hot Topic. We even have a VR title, and as polarizing as it seems Security Breach has become, it got a spot in an official PlayStation showcase, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. Enough of the pre-show though, let's get into the game itself, starting with the story, and seeing as this is FNAF we're talking about, this is gonna be pretty loaded, so let me talk about how I'm tackling this. I'll be going through the lore as best as I can, and I'll be doing it on a game-by-game basis so as to not convolute things as much as they already inherently will be. Also, apologies if I miss something, or I'm not as exuberant as usual for this part. I kinda stopped caring about FNAF lore by Pizzeria Simulator, but I just want to cover my bases. So, you are a security guard named Mike Schmidt, just hoping to work a standard night shift, but then you get a call from the good old phone guy and he tells you the animatronics like to do whatever they feel like at night, and if you're caught by one, you'll probably be forcefully shoved in a Freddy Fazbear suit. Since you obviously don't want that, you gotta protect yourself from these psychopaths that sing for kids until your shift is over. You then come back for an additional 4 nights just to laugh at the animatronics, and then clock in overtime because you really hate yourself. That's the story at face value, but you're able to extrapolate a few extra details from the game. The phone guy mentions a bite of 87, where apparently one of the lovely patrons at this establishment got their goddamn frontal lobe bitten off by one of the animatronics. It's not directly stated which robot did it, but the main suspects are Foxy, because he got put out of order for a reason, probably, and Freddy, because apparently you can see handprints around his face or something. This is probably one of the most notable plot details in the series, and is something I definitely won't bitch about when we get to FNAF 4 at some point. There's also these newspaper clippings that mention 5 missing children that were probably definitely killed in the establishment, and ever since, people are reporting the animatronics acting strange and weird smells coming from the suits. It's not hard to figure out, but I'll spell it out for you anyway. The kids' corpses were stuffed in the suits and now haunt the animatronics. Great. That's pretty much it for the time being, so let's round on over to gameplay. At a glance, this game is pretty simple, and honestly it kind of is. Most of the difficulty comes from managing both your resources and maybe even your nerves. You got 2 doors to the side's view and 2 buttons on each. One for lights, to check if anything's lurking in the doorway, and the second is for the door, slam it in the face of your perpetrator like you just broke up with them. You also have a camera system so that you can monitor the movements of the animatronics. The main thing stringing these mechanics together is the power meter. Since the people making this place really couldn't give a damn about your survivability, you need to worry about not using too much power or else the lights will go out, which is something you really don't want to happen because it nearly guarantees game over. This means you need to conserve power by keeping the doors open when no robots are outside, not checking the lights too frequently, and not overusing the camera systems. Go green, your life depends on it. The animatronics also have their own behaviors you gotta deal with. Bonnie and Chica just run at you from the left and right hall respectively, Foxy needs to be checked up on or he'll get bored and come kill you, and Freddy is like a mishmash of Foxy and Chica. Freddy is a bit of a hassle on his own though. Checking on the show stage will prevent him from coming after you for a bit, but eventually he'll be up and at him and take the same route Chica does. You can look at whatever camera he's on to slow him down, but that's easier said than done, since he's the only animatronic that hides in the cameras, so you'll need to look for his glowing eyes in the darkness. The worst part is that, unlike Bonnie or Chica, when he gets to your hull corner, he won't go for the doorway, he'll gun straight for you, which means if Freddy gets too far, it's a guaranteed death sentence. As soon as Freddy is off the stage, he is your #1 priority, which makes him your most important and most threatening adversary, which is pretty cool since he is the mascot after all. Now their behaviors can make things a bit difficult, mainly with Bonnie, Chica, and Freddy, because Foxy's pretty consistent across the board. Bonnie and Chica have the same problem, they can stand outside the door for however long they feel like, and while usually they stand outside for reasonable periods of time, there was one night where Chica decided to stand outside the doorway for multiple hours straight, which as you can imagine completely killed my power for the rest of the night. Meanwhile, Freddy sometimes comes off his stage immediately, even when I do monitor him as good as possible, which really messes with how you keep track of everyone else, especially since you already need to have a good portion of time dedicated to watching Foxy. I don't think I ever died from these things, but it definitely did up the tension. No, actually, I didn't die on any of the 5 nights, which is funny considering this is the one I've played the least out of the 3. Beating the game rewards you with a measly $120 for surviving this murder game, and now we get to rub salt in the wound because we just unlocked Night 6. There's actually not much to say about it, just a harder variant of what you've already gone through, but after a few attempts you should be able to beat it as well. This then gives you Custom Night, where you can mess with the difficulty levels of each animatronic to give yourself an extra challenge. The poster boy of Custom Night challenges though is 420 mode. Basically just cranking every animatronic's difficulty level up to max and getting ready to kill yourself over and over. I'm gonna be honest, I've only ever done one of these Custom Night challenges in FNAF 2 before, and I never even attempted all the others, but hey, maybe some other day. Nowadays though, the thing about FNAF 1 is that, in comparison to some of the other games, I find the game loop to be a bit simplistic and, especially in early nights, pretty boring honestly, but what I always enjoy from this game is the atmosphere, which brings me to how FNAF 1 weaves anxiety and ambience into a nice little package that's pretty impressive for a first outing. We can start in the office, where the only sound you'll be accompanied by will be the humming of your Office fan, and not too dissimilar to that, the only sound you'll hear when checking the monitor is the cameras themselves turning to view the area. This only makes it more alarming when an abnormal sound does come up. There's a bunch that you can hear, like some carousel music or just some random ambient sounds, but let's take one like Foxy's humming, for instance. This sound means nothing, but the player will fill in their own blanks. If Foxy isn't active, then they'll be scrambling to figure out what that noise was since they haven't been introduced to him yet. Alternatively, if Foxy is active, then the player might be paranoid about what Foxy is doing. Both of these outcomes could result in them making a rash decision due to their own anxiety. This creation of stress is only heightened when it's a hallucination that has no bearing on anything, like when you see flashes of the animatronics with this little glitchy sound. The most popular hallucination is actually an Easter egg in the form of Golden Freddy. When you check the left hall corner, there's a chance the poster on the wall will change to Golden Freddy, and then going back to the office will have him sitting there. You can bring up the cameras to make him go away, but if you stare at him for too long, he'll crash your game. Although, don't expect to encounter him while playing, because even when I was trying to get him to show up, it wasn't happening. Also, this is a good time to mention, the phone guy dies on night 4 after a presumably unfriendly run-in with one of the animatronics after hours. Seeing as the noise over the phone and the jumpscare noise are the same, it's presumed that Golden Freddy is the one that did it, and since he seemingly doesn't have an endoskeleton and so can't move, that just brings more questions onto the table. This guy's actually another one of the suspects for the Bite of Iggy 7, not just because his broken down and decrepit look, coupled with the strange method of encountering him, makes his entire existence suspicious, but also because playing in 1987 in the custom night menu causes his jumpscare to happen. We got a little off topic there, but the point is, this game does a great job of keeping the player on edge, and usually success means not only managing your resources, but also your stress, and it's something that I still really enjoy about this game. Later games do expand on this, but FNAF 1 is one of the more notable examples of it in my opinion. And yeah, that's FNAF 1, and I never mentioned this while reviewing it, but while I still think this game is pretty solid for a first attempt, I don't find myself going back to this one super often. This is one of the easiest games in the series, which for a first game makes sense, but it makes it a little boring to go back to for me. Just playing through it for this video, I was barely even paying attention on nights 1 through 3. I started paying a little more attention when I got to nights 4 through 5, but the only nights I found challenging at all were night 6 and 420 mode. In fact, I have a few dead spots in my recording, on night 1 in particular, where I'm just doing nothing, and that's because nobody was moving for a while, and I was playing New Super Mario Bros. 2 while the night was going, and it only made things slightly less boring. While the easy difficulty might make it a bit too easy for my taste, which honestly might just be because I've played like 7 FNAF games, and that's not even including the fan games, it would make for a great introduction if you for some reason haven't given the series a shot at this point. FNAF hit it big, and of course this meant a sequel had to be made, and just a short time later we get it in the form of Five Nights at Freddy's 2. FNAF 2 gave birth to a lot of things that will become staples of the series, making it pretty important, and that all starts with the pre-release. We would start getting vague teasers for the content that'd be in the game. Grand reopening 2015, huh? Yeah, sure. The teasers for FNAF 2 showed there was some busted up animatronics as well as some new versions of old favorites. Although I do find it interesting they used Withered Bonnie in the Bonnie teaser, but for the Foxy teaser, they didn't use Withered Foxy, instead they used Foxy from FNAF 1. Anyway, nitpicks aside. We also got our first look at the mask we'd presumably be using to hide from oncoming terror, and an unassuming camera button. Now, I never mentioned this, but my doctor diagnosed me with a disease that makes me want to brighten every image I see online, so just give me a second here. Oh. Also, that grand reopening came a little earlier than anticipated, since the game ended up coming out November 10th, 2014, a little under 3 months after the first game came out. This is another staple FNAF 2 introduced that would stick around for the next 2 games. The opposite of a delay, just like how I'm going to do the opposite of delaying this any further and jump right into the game. I'm sorry, that was really the best segue I could come up with. We got a new story, but it's relatively the same as the first. Our guard for this game is Jeremy Fitzgerald, who took a job at this Freddy location and is in for a long few nights. Thankfully, we'll be getting more info from our good old phone guy, who seems remarkably less dead than our last call with him in FNAF 1, so that's good for him. This is because FNAF 2 is actually a prequel. In fact, to jump the gun a bit here, the withered animatronics and parts and services are repurposed into the guys in FNAF 1 when the place closes down. Anyway, the phone guy is gonna get us up to speed on the new faces on the block here. The first guys you'll see when you boot up the game are the Toy Series animatronics. We got new toy versions of Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica, as well as a sort of toy Foxy named Mangle. Apparently the story behind Mangle is that they tried to redesign Foxy to look more child-friendly, and seeing as this one looks less child-friendly than the one in the first game, it's safe to say something went wrong. Apparently the kids kept taking the thing apart because, according to the phone guy, kids these days can't keep their hands to themselves, and eventually the staff got tired of putting the poor thing back together, so now it sits there as a take-apart, put-back-together attraction. Okay, look, I know that this entire series, none of this was meant to be heavily rooted in realism. The location from the first game alone probably had a level of health code violation so high it bordered on comical. Despite that, though, it always kind of rode the fine line between realistically plausible and kind of fucking absurd. Guess where Mangle goes? I mean, I couldn't imagine kids finding this more appealing considering... look at the thing. I'd shit bricks even if I wasn't a kid. Like, I get it, children typically put their hands on anything with no regard for the consequences, 1 point in the realism column, but even then, as a kid, I couldn't imagine touching the animatronics at Chuck E. Cheese, but whatever, I guess. The toy animatronics also bring some entirely new friends with them. First there's Balloon Boy, God's least favorite little mistake. I hate this thing. The other new face is pretty cool though. The puppet, or the marionette, whichever you prefer, it kind of strikes a nice design balance the first game's animatronics had, where I initially looked at them and thought, what child wouldn't be afraid of that? And then remember how old Chuck E. Cheese animatronics looked and realized that everyone loved these things at some point. Out of the toys, my favorite is easily the puppet, cause honestly, the others don't look too scary. Toy Freddy looks really goofy to me, Toy Bonnie I actually like the design of, but he strikes me more as a platforming mascot than horror enemy, and Toy Chica exists, and the internet hasn't recovered. Mangle I gave some shit for having a ridiculous concept, but seeing it hang on the ceilings and walls is actually really creepy and I quite like it. And there's Balloon Boy, who isn't scary, just an annoyance. I want to chuck him in a garbage can. If the toys didn't do it for you though, we have 4 more animatronics to give you problems. The withered animatronics. They're the most busted up out of all of them. The broken down versions of the original 4 sitting in parts and services. These ones are even more beat up than Mangle was, but since people were never meant to see them, I can give it a pass. Withered Freddy and Foxy just feel like slightly more worn down versions of their FNAF 1 counterparts. Withered Chica looks real weird to me, maybe it's the no hands, but what's going on with her mouth? Why is it like that? Withered Bonnie's probably my favorite though. He's the most dismantled out of everyone, missing his entire face, but I don't know, I just think it looks cool, and I don't think it's too unrealistic considering the utter state some animatronics in real life have found themselves in. Anyway, to get a bit more on track, Night 4 is when shit starts hitting the fan in terms of plot, since the phone guy mentions that the toys' facial recognition systems were messed with, and while they interact with the kids just fine, they're a little passive-aggressive towards the adults. Night 5 things start getting even worse. Nobody's allowed in or out of the place, especially any other employees. They're considering moving you to a new position on the day shift since a new position just got freed up, which is a bit suspicious, but that at least means no more nighttime hell you gotta partake in, so that's nice. Importantly though, they mention they're getting in contact with the original owners, with their original location being Fredbear's Family Diner, which will become extremely important the further into the series we get. At the end of Night 5, we get our paycheck as usual, and it's revealed the year we're playing this in is none other than 1987, when the supposed big bite is supposed to occur, meaning that the new bunch of suspects are the FNAF 2 guys. If I remember correctly, the main one people suspected around this time was Mangle, given that its jump scare comes down at your head in a chomping form, and also that Mangle looks like this. But again, we don't have any answers on this, and we still get to wait on FNAF 4 for that little tidbit. Beating the 5 nights gets you night 6, as usual, where you actually get another phone call where the place is being closed down, begging the question of why the hell we're here. But we also get this important tidbit of info.
Hello. What on earth are you doing there? Didn't you get the memo? The place is closed down, at least for a while. Someone used one of the suits. We had a spare in the back, a yellow one. Someone used it. Now none of them are acting right.
Now, while this sounds extremely important, as far as this game's concerned, it isn't, so we'll have to keep that in our back pockets until we get to the next game. That's the blatant story given to you, but just like the first game, there's some extra sources of info, this being the Atari-style minigames you're randomly given on death. Unfortunately though, either I have the shittiest luck or the chances of finding them are extremely rare, because in my entire playthrough, I only ran into one of them. There's 4, and of these 3 are important. Guess which one I got? Thankfully I got another one during custom night, but I still had to grind to get death minigames. Grinding in FNAF. Fantastic. Especially when it isn't guaranteed that you'll find a minigame you haven't played before. And before you ask, no, I did not play Mario during the process. I played Smash Bros. Anyway, first on the docket is Give Gifts, Give Life. You play as the puppet giving gifts to the 4 corpses that we can presume to be kids, and then giving life, ending with a golden Freddy jump scare that just barely obscures a 5th kid that you can't get to in time. Second is Take Cake to the Children. You're Freddy trying to juggle giving cake to all the kids while one stands outside. That is until Happy here decides to make a pit stop for a quick murder sesh, ending with a puppet jump scare. One of the only times in this game where something will be foreshadowed in a cool way and actually followed through on. Third, Foxy Go Go Go. Play as Foxy, run from your curtain at Pirate's Cove to the kids to put on a show. Or at least that is until Smiles comes back and those kids aren't so happy anymore, and Foxy ain't too jazzed about it. Fun fact, this was actually a bit of a point of contention in the fan base back in the day, because in the other minigame I didn't mention, that being Save Them, where you follow the puppet for a bit, there's a chance this aubergine man will cut the fun early. He's now known as the purple guy, clearly, but back then people were wondering, if this is the purple guy, then who's the person in the Foxy and Cake minigames? Since people used to think he was a second character, he was dubbed Pink Guy. This was dumb. I mean, I get it, colorblind people exist, but he doesn't look that different, and this was before the series would start getting convoluted with which character is in which situation, so I think it's pretty clear that Pink Guy and Purple Guy are the exact same person. My qualms with accessing them aside, the minigames do give us some good answers to the lingering questions of the robots being possessed by the dead kids, and the murderer behind it all. Purple Guy killed these people, the puppet gave gifts, and then gave life, kid souls inside the animatronics. Neat. Wow, I just realized I haven't touched on gameplay yet, Jesus. So FNAF 2 had one big thing to send shockwaves on the gameplay side of the sequel. No more doors. Yup, we got one giant entrance right in front of us and 2 vents to our sides that are arguably more important than the big entrance, and neither of which have any way of shutting you in from oncoming threats. Instead of door lights, you have a flashlight that you can now shine down the hallway in front of you, and the 2 vents also have lights of their own, which are for some reason connected to the same battery as your flashlight. That's a bit strange. Your main method of defense is the Freddy mask you can wear to trick the animatronics that I'll delve more into in a bit. The camera system also obviously makes its return, but now it's dark as hell normally, unless you use the lights that I guess are connected to the cameras to see better. Hell, you can't even see at all into parts and service without using the lights. Again though, the camera lights are connected to the same universal power supply that the vent lights and flashlight are. It makes sense if this was part of the building's main power, but once the power you have is dead, it isn't lights out, so it's a bit weird. Honestly, the more I think about it, despite the game having a ton more animatronics to deal with than the previous game, I think it only has slightly more going on in it. This probably has to do with the fact that they all function pretty similar to one another, with the only two unique threats being Foxy and the puppet. Foxy shows up at the end of the hall and you need to periodically flash him with the light to make him go away. The puppet meanwhile stays in its box in the prize corner, and you have to go to that camera to make sure the box stays wound up, otherwise they'll pop out, and this means game over is an inevitability. These sound real easy to deal with, but when coupled with everything else, it can be a real hassle to manage. Everyone else here are dealt with using the mask. See, there's two forms of mask animatronics here. Ones that force you to put it on as quickly as possible or else die, and the ones that come from the vents that make you wear the mask until you hear them going away. The first, but certainly not the last, instance of audio cues being the difference between life and death. The first type is damn stressful to deal with, since you'll have to flick down to the mask tab in a similar manner to how you open the cameras. What's worse is that if they're in the office for too long while you're in the cameras, they'll flick it down for you, which is kind of panic-inducing, but thankfully my Twitch muscles gave me a quick save multiple times despite the anxiety. The vent guys are comparatively easier to deal with since you just need to check the lights and put on the mask until they leave, but that means sitting there for a bit with the mask on, which kills me inside because I know that music box is winding down while I'm sitting here. Also, quick point to mention, out of all the vent robots, Toy Bonnie gets this unique animation of him ganging your face, and I'm not sure if that was meant to be a thing for all the other ones. This might sound overwhelming and on harder difficulties, to some extent it is, but you don't always have every animatronic coming after you. A lot of the toy animatronics get phased out as the nights go on, leaving only a handful to deal with by the time you get to night 5. Really, the only consistent threats are the withered animatronics, Balloon Boy, and the puppet. Oh, that's right, Balloon Boy. I forgot to mention why I hate this guy so much. Unlike all the other vent animatronics, when he gets into the office, he doesn't kill you, he takes away your batteries, meaning no lights anywhere, and if Foxy's active, which he more than likely is, this basically guarantees death. Honestly, it's more aggravating to know I've lost just seeing this nuisance standing right in front of me, and then waiting for someone to kill me than to just die. I was able to get through nights 1 through 5 pretty easy, and I did like that FNAF 2 got things going a little faster than the first game did, but man, Night 6 just obliterated me, and I don't know why. First off, Night 6 introduces Golden Freddy into the fray, graduating from Easter egg to main antagonist. He isn't why this night is hard, if anything he barely shows up. For some reason though, I just get wombo-comboed by everyone in the worst way possible. Withered Bonnie and Withered Chico won't stop showing up, which barely gives me any time for Foxy or the puppet. People in the vent don't give me enough time for the puppet, winding the puppet back up gives me less time for Foxy, and puts me more at risk if Bonnie or Chica show up, and if Balloon Boy gets in, I just turn the game off. I have, no shit, over half an hour of recorded attempts at this night, which honestly made me sad because I used to blow through FNAF 2 for fun, but I guess I haven't played in too long. I used to be real good at this game too. After that session of spending 30 minutes doing nothing but this one night and consistently getting to 4 or 5 AM and then dying, I hate to say it, but I gave up and edited my save file to beat Night 6. I've done it multiple times before, I nearly did it 5 separate times, and I didn't feel like wasting any more time on it. I'm sorry. Anyway, Custom Night is back and a lot more robust than last time too, albeit some of that comes from there just being more animatronics to alter the values of. Although for some reason you can't change the difficulty of the puppet, which is a bit dumb, but alright I guess. You also control a new guard named Fritz Smith here, presumably the guy that replaced you after Jeremy got moved to the day shift. The main addition is Challenge Mode, one of my favorite features added to these games. Having a set of really difficult challenges to complete with different animatronics added. For example, there's New and Shiny where you deal with all the toys, Foxy Foxy where you have Withered Foxy and Mangle set to their max difficulty, Cupcake Challenge and Fazbear Fever where everyone's set to 5 and 10 respectively, And then there's the classic Golden Freddy challenge with all the animatronics set to max difficulty. These are really fun, and there's even an incentive to do it, since completing each will give you a little desk object, most of which being plushies for the main animatronics. And I did do a few of these, not just cause, well, I had to show the little dudes on the desk, but also cause I genuinely enjoy it. Ended up being 420 for the final star, Foxy Foxy for the Foxy plush, and Double Trouble for the Bonnie plush before stopping. You can even get a Golden Freddy plush for beating Golden Freddy mode, which is cool, but as you can imagine, I didn't even try for this playthrough. It's such a cool little feature, but for some reason it didn't come back until Sister Location. Hell, Custom Night in general won't be back until that game. I mean, I know it'd be hard to bring the challenge mode back, since, spoiler, FNAF 3 only has one animatronic that can kill you, and FNAF 4 trims it back to the core 4 robots, but not having the option for Custom Night in these is a bit rough if I'm honest. Well, that's the end of Five Nights at Freddy's 2, and going back to this one really made me realize how much this game paved the way for the rest of the series, setting up the purple guy, giving more context to the whole dead kids deal, and generally doing a good job setting up for the climactic finale in Five Nights at Freddy's 3. Climactic finale. So, Five Nights at Freddy's 3. This is probably the game people were most mixed about in the series, from what I could tell. At least before Security Breach came out, that is. Now, remember when I said at the start that Five Nights at Freddy's was the first horror series I had ever played? Let's get more specific with that statement. The first horror game I ever played was FNAF 3. My strategy at the time was kind of dumb, if I'm honest. I wasn't good with horror, so I watched the first part of Markiplier playing each game that was out at the time, and then deduced FNAF 3 looked the least scary, so that was the one I settled on. Obviously, I've gotten a lot better with horror to the point where I've expanded to playing other series, and if I'm honest, a lot of the FNAF games nowadays don't even make me flinch, but that explains why I decided to start at the middle of the series for no reason. This one, from what I can tell, had a lot of hype behind it, and seeing as the series had some good momentum after 2 games people quite enjoyed, and the trailer making this seem like the biggest entry yet, it's not that big of a surprise. On top of that, it seemed like we had a main threat this time. While all the FNAF 2 teasers were of course showing faces both new and familiar, FNAF 3's teasers all seemed to be putting special attention on this new Bonnie-looking animatronic. You can even see him in the dark in this one teaser. From what I can gather of FNAF 3 pre-release, people were really fixated on this box, thinking the new guy would assemble an animatronic to kill you from this box of old parts. Although when the game actually came out, sorry to say it's just a decoration in your office. What a weird thing to highlight. Similar to the last game, we also have an unassuming teaser of the cameras. You know the drill. Ooh, lines. Our teasers also highlight what seem to be these burnt-up versions of Foxy, Chica, and damn it! The teaser that seems most important, though, at least to me, is the He Always Does teaser, referencing the words from the trailer. It's pretty mundane, but since the text is the color that's always present when shit goes wrong, I think it's earned its importance. So let's get through our final story for today. Our night guard for this evening will be... actually, he doesn't have a name this time. I mean, it didn't mean much in the grand scheme of things, but that's interesting. Another change-up for this game, we don't have a phone guy this time, instead we have a phone dude. The main big change here is that we're not in a pizza restaurant anymore, we're instead in the horror attraction Fazbear's Fright, trying to make a buck off the tragedies and urban legends set at the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza restaurants. Harsh, but realistic. Honestly, I'm just surprised that a parent who walked into Fazbear's Pizza and walked out a kid down didn't find this disrespectful and try to burn the place down. First day on the job, there's literally nothing going on. Yeah, they haven't found any actual animatronics for the attraction yet, just some decorations. It's a bit weird that they do one of these tutorial nights on the third game, but whatever, I guess. I don't mind the idea of it, especially since 1, unlike the previous games, Phone Dude doesn't really tell you how to defend yourself, and 2, the game doesn't force you to learn stuff step by step, and more so just lets you fiddle around with stuff and let you figure it out at your own pace. But as you can imagine, if you decide to replay this game, that means Night 1 is a whole bunch of nothing, since you probably know how to play the game already. I don't want to slam the attempt, cause it isn't a horrible idea, but since I've played this game multiple times before, yeah, Smash Bros. Came right back out again. Like, yeah, I know the one in FNAF 2 was an instance of me being dumb and wanting to show everything, and most people won't do that, but it's still tiring me out a bit having to sit here and wait for every game. Thankfully, this will be the last time I have to sit doing nothing in this series, to my knowledge. Second day on the job is a lot more interesting, cause, well, let's just say their searching around was successful, and here's Springtrap, one of my favorites in the series. He's a dead corpse inside of a Bonnie suit. Why is there a dead body inside of the suit? Well, we gotta get through the lore stuff to get there, so just sit tight. Phone Dude doesn't really tell us much, but he does find these old training tapes hosted by the phone guy, who gives us some good lore details once again. The main thing being talked about here are these spring lock suits they have. Fasten the spring locks inside, and it'll be a mascot costume. Put them back to normal, and it'll be an animatronic. Budget cuts suck. As you listen to the tapes more, though, you can gather that these things definitely aren't up to code, as slightly nudging into them, or even the moisture from your breath, can cause them to go back into animatronic mode, killing the person inside. Remember that last one. As the nights go on, you find out, uh-oh, the Springlock suits are being retired after some unfortunate incidents at a sister location, and no, not that sister location. Phone Guy also mentions a safe room that functions both as storage and a safety location for employees, that no customer should be allowed inside under any circumstances. On top of that, someone moved a Spring Bonnie animatronic, so that's just amazing, ain't it? Alright, so I want to sift on over to gameplay real quick. We're not done with the lore stuff, just going through everything in this order will be slightly better. This game kinda melds the previous 2 games together. You got no doors like in FNAF 2, but instead of letting the animatronics come to you and then making them go away like you did in that game, you want to play keep away just like in FNAF 1. This time you actually have 2 monitors located at the opposite ends of the office. The one on the right is your camera system you've come to expect at this point, and you'll also notice that you don't have a power supply to manage, thankfully. There's 2 new buttons. The first is a play audio button that makes a little balloon boy laugh to lure Springtrap from room to room. The other is a map toggle that shows those lines we were so hyped up about in the teaser. These are the vents. They have their own map system now because there's a whole lot more of them than there were in FNAF 2. They basically act as shortcuts for Springtrap to go from room to room. Thankfully though, you can seal the vent by double-clicking the camera you want to seal. The second monitor is located on the left side of your office. This is used to reboot your systems, yeah. Instead of making sure your lights stay on, this time you need to make sure your 3 systems don't break down. Cameras will break after using them for too long and make you unable to see anything. The audio systems will break after using the audio lure a few times, and that limit becomes less and less as the nights go on. These are pretty self-explanatory. The ventilation systems, though, are a bit more interesting. It'll randomly shut down and cause an alarm to start going off. And if the vent system shut down, it should be your top priority to get it running again. I know it doesn't seem as bad as not being able to use your cameras or audio, but it'll cause you to hallucinate, which will make you start seeing multiple spring traps on the cameras, making it substantially harder to tell where he is. Now you might be thinking, if I only got one guy to watch, then this should be a lot easier than the previous games, and while it kind of is, there's also a lot more working against you too. Firstly, Springtrap hides in the cameras just like Freddy in FNAF 1, but unlike Freddy, he's a lot more crafty in his hiding spots, and you don't even have the luxury of seeing his glowing eyes in the dark a lot of the time, so you gotta do a much better job of looking out for him. In fact, I've had multiple times playing this game wondering where Springtrap was, not even knowing that I was looking right at him. It gets a little tough at times. Also, it's important to acknowledge that Springtrap is the only real animatronic in the building with you, because we've got a bunch of animatronics that are all in your head. Remember those burnt up animatronics from the teasers? Yeah, well these are the Phantoms, with hallucination versions of Freddy, Chica, Foxy, Balloon Boy, Mangle, and even the puppet to deal with. Freddy will occasionally be roaming outside your window, and not having a monitor flipped up for too long will make him pop up. Balloon Boy will sometimes show up when you turn on your cameras, and you have to switch cameras quickly and not get jumped. Chica, Mangle, and the puppet have specific cameras that they can sometimes appear at, and looking at them too long makes them come out. I actually kinda like these guys. Having to restart your systems gives Springtrap optimal time to slip away, and not knowing where he is will probably cause you to freak out and search the cameras frantically. The camera phantoms act as punishment for not being in control of your stress, bringing back that feeling of anxiety management from the first game. I will say though, the puppet feels a bit too punishing, because this thing sticks around for a lot longer than the other phantoms do, and just like them, it'll cause your ventilation to go down when it goes away, which just gives Springtrap even more time. If the amount of time the puppet stuck around for was decreased, I think that would be a lot more balanced. The only Phantom I don't like is Phantom Foxy. Not because of his design, I actually think he's my favorite out of all the Phantoms, but because unlike the others, he doesn't have a cue for him showing up or a way of avoiding him. From what I can tell, he just randomly shows up, which punishes you for doing nothing, which sucks a ton. So suddenly things just got a lot more crowded, but you're still able to tip the scales in your favor. You can reboot systems up to max even if they aren't broken yet, so if Springtrap's, let's say, going through a vent you've already closed, you can run over to the panel and reset your audio so that you'll be prepared if he runs off again. Speaking of which, there's actually a set amount of times that the audio can be played each night before it breaks, and if you remember this, you'll be able to better anticipate it. At the end of all of this, though, I still think this is one of the most temperamental games in the series difficulty-wise. Depending on what Springtrap's feeling like, he can either be a pain in the ass or dumb as bricks. My first run for this review, nights 2, 3, and 5, I was just juggling him between cams 8 and 9, only stopping to reset the systems. Meanwhile, night 4, he was killing me a ton, it's a bit weird. At the end of each night, you'll play another one of those mini-games, which is a good time to shift back on over to lore. You follow around this Shadow Freddy as each character to this room, where you can't enter for some reason, and trying to leave results in our favorite purple guy dismantling you. The final one has you playing as one of the ghost kids we saw in FNAF 2, and this time we're finally able to enter that room that we couldn't before. The purple guy is clearly freaked out by the ghosts of his victims, and in a last-ditch effort jumps in the spring Bonnie suit on the ground. And hey, remember how you shouldn't get moisture on the spring lock suits? Yep, the dead corpse inside of the main animatronic you've been facing is none other than the mass murderer himself, thus ending 5 nights at... oh god damn it. Yeah, this is a first for the series, multiple endings, and to get the best ending, you need to play these secret minigames. During each end-of-night minigame, there's this one room that will give you very vague hints on what you need to do. It's pretty cryptic, but with a bit of ingenuity, for the most part, you can work it out. I've done this so many times I remember all the steps, but personally, I'd recommend using a guide. Anyway, the order goes like this. End of Night 1 minigame shows a weird message on the left and a button combination on the right. The code on the left is our first step, and it says BB double click, so go to cam 8 and double click the Balloon Boy poster. Now jump out of bounds on the top left and go collect the rainbow balloon. Next, input the button combination on the arcade machines in cam 7. Go through the Mangle minigame and jump out of bounds on the top right, climb up the balloons, and get the cake. Then go back to the Balloon Boy minigame and jump across the balloons to give the cake to the kid. End of night minigame hint is 4 gray cupcakes that you'll need to find. Night 3, search the cameras for the gray cupcakes. They're pretty well hidden, but you'll find them on cams 2, 3, 4, and 6. Jump out of bounds again in the Chica minigame and give the kid the cake. Now we get to the infamous part of the good ending. The end of night hint is a bunch of numbers that I recommend writing down. Now on night 4, look at this set of panels on the left side of the office, and type in the number combination like you're using a number pad on a phone. How in the hell were you supposed to figure out how to do that? It'd make a lot more sense if you had to look at the cameras in the order the numbers give you, but nope, instead you do this idiocy, and we're not even at the worst part yet. This minigame is the hardest to figure out. It's a 3x3 space of the same minigame room that you have to take a very specific route through to get to the kid. For the love of God, do yourself a favor and just use a map, because this is really stupid. Eventually though, you can get to the kid and give them the cake. Now conversely, we have the easiest minigame to get to. The end of night hint is just a Shagobani. Fun fact, Shagobani is actually one of several Easter egg characters in FNAF 2. I actually tried to get them, as well as Shago Freddy will appear, but it just wasn't happening, and the only Easter egg character I could get to appear was this endoskeleton. Anyway, on night 5 there will be a Shagobani figure on your desk. Just double click and you're in. This minigame is super easy too. Just press the S key to travel through rooms from the previous minigames, get out of bounds in the Balloon Boy room, and then shift on over back to the room with the kid. There's also one final minigame on night 5, that being Happiest Day, that you get to by double-clicking the poster on the right of Cam 3, where you finally give the last kid their birthday party. Despite the fact that I'm 90% sure this is required for the best ending, I don't think it gives you any hints for it, unless I'm missing something, which really should have been done. Finally, beating Night 5 gets you the best ending, and I actually kinda like having multiple endings in FNAF games. It's pretty cool, just I feel like this one was one of the more convoluted ones, and some steps, mainly the Fredbear minigame, just sucked. On the bright side though, the best ending music is really nice actually. It's sad, but has this sense of finality, if that makes any sense. I don't know, I was never really good at describing music. Beating the game with any ending also unlocks Nightmare, and despite the flashy name, it's just this game's Night 6. Night 6 is actually where we get our last bit of lore given to us. The newspaper clipping at the end shows that Fazbear's Frag is burned down. It's supposedly blamed on faulty wiring, but the cause isn't completely clear. Although what is clear is that Springtrap is a bit of a stubborn bastard, as even a fire wasn't enough to put him down. Not sure why, but Night 6 doesn't feel as special in this game as the others. Maybe that's just because this one doesn't unlock a custom night afterwards? No, instead you unlock more stuff for the extras menu. A new feature added into this game that I actually quite like. You get art for each animatronic, no art for Phantom Mangle though, that's a bit strange. Getting the good ending lets you replay the minigames and a jump scare menu for seeing all the jump scares, which is neat. The coolest one though is cheats. Fast nights, which makes nights take half the time, a radar that lets you know where Springtrap is at all times, and one that makes you never get errors even when you get jump scared by the phantoms. The most unique one though is the aggressive cheat, since it doesn't help you, it actually makes the game harder. It's exactly what it sounds like. Springtrap comes for you a lot quicker now, and using it while playing Night 6 is this game's version of Golden Freddy mode, although I didn't really bother because all it does is add a star to the title screen. That's pretty much it in terms of content, but before we finish here, I do want to go back to talking about the game's atmosphere and finally talk about the jump scares. You'll notice I skipped over atmosphere when talking about FNAF 2, and that's because there really wasn't much to say. It was mostly the same as FNAF 1, just a bit downgraded in some areas. The main place I don't think it was as good was the office. FNAF 1's office was grimy, it was dark, and there were cobwebs everywhere. Most of all though, it felt like a really cramped space. FNAF 2's office feels like the complete opposite. It's comparatively a lot better lit, looks much better kept, and is a lot bigger of a space. FNAF 1's office feels like an uncomfortable space no matter the situation. FNAF 2's office is only unpleasant with the context of killer animatronics coming for you. Without that, it's at worst a kind of weird room. So why mention this now? Well, it's because FNAF 3 not only does a good job of picking the ball back up, but also has its own little details to give it its own flair. Firstly, the office is covered in this sickly shade of green, and the walls and cabinets are all extremely uncleanly. This shade of green here also permeates into the cameras, where even the darkest room on the cameras will be shrouded in this tinge of green. I also want to acknowledge the uniqueness of the phantoms. Since they're all ghostly figures, that means they don't have to abide by being realistic, making for some horror that has a dreamlike essence to it. Chica's face illuminating the arcade machine screens, Balloon Boy covering your entire monitor screen before suddenly appearing behind it. It's genuinely something you'd see in a nightmare, and I find that really cool. My favorite detail FNAF 3 has, though, surrounds Springtrap. It's already cool that your main threat here is the dead body of the main antagonist, but I also love how much of it is left up to the imagination. It's hard to make out the body inside of him, but it's just enough to where you can let the mind fill in some of the blanks. On top of this, there are actually some times where if Springtrap is on a specific camera, you can get a better look, but seeing these is difficult since Springtrap's movements are obviously random. One of these is even as jump scares, and I really like that given how the gameplay works here, it's a lot less likely that it'll kill you from this side, and so a lot less likely that you'll get the chance to look. This subtlety not only makes Springtrap a lot more imposing, but also contributes to him being one of, if not my favorite animatronic in the series. On that note, let's talk about the jump scares. Now, I know a lot of people typically don't like jump scares, saying it's a cheap way of trying to get across the fear. I personally don't care for jump scares. I generally prefer when horror games communicate fear through a scary ambience, and generally being subtle. In fact, this is something I even praise some of these games for. However, when it comes to FNAF specifically, I don't mind the jump scares because they act as a punishment for losing at the game. With maybe the exception of FNAF 3, if you got through the entirety of one of these games without dying, you would not experience a single jump scare, and that's what makes it fine for me. There's a difference between a game trying to cheaply scare you and a game using it as an add-on for you failing to cope with the management that they expect from you. Of course, though, that's just my opinion, and if you disagree, I understand and would love to hear what you think. With that, we close out the original FNAF trilogy, and I found these games to still be pretty solid in their own right. Sure, they definitely have some rougher areas, and they are a bit simplistic, but I do think they provide some fun, and wouldn't mind recommending them to someone who hasn't played a horror game before. If you haven't tried the games yet, then yeah, I completely understand the hype surrounding them when they came out was a bit much, but they're at least worth a shot, so pick whichever one sounds best to you and give it a whirl. I'd love to revisit FNAF at some point later down the line. Maybe for Halloween this year? I mean, hell, this video was supposed to come out around Halloween last year until I had to rewrite the entire script. Besides, we only got like 4 games to go, right? Oh yeah, there's also those spin-offs, and the books, and the weird mobile game. And the VR game. I don't even have a VR headset, damn it. Let's hope I get enough cardboard for whenever I feel like doing that video.